TJS Spotlight, Episode 25. Hey Jets fans, how's it going? Yanni Lunga here, and welcome to this 25th episode of the TJS Spotlight podcast. The first thing I want to do today is thank to all of you who have been listening to the podcast, who have been following the TJS Spotlight on Twitter. The Twitter community is just growing day after day. It's amazing. Also on Facebook or Google Plus or Pinterest. I've been seeing a lot of activity also on Pinterest. So thank you very much. A big shout out goes to you. And thank you for being a subscriber to the TJS Spotlight podcast. And, if you haven't yet, you can sign up for it at tjspotlight.com/toolbox, where you will get a free ebook that talks about online promotion. And you will also get weekly tips and resources. And, you will also know as soon as the new episode of the podcast is up, you will be the first to know. Let's go immediately about today's episode, because this is just a great episode. Another great guest, like a sensational artist today on the podcast. The last 2 weeks, we've talked about gigs, how to get gigs, the different type of concerts, and what they can do for you. You probably remember from episode 23 with Tony Dudley Evans and episode 24 last week with Nicola Milan, who talked about the different kind of concerts and the gig metrics. So, what different types of gigs can do for you. Today's episode, it's another episode of the series A Jets Talk With. In case it's your first time listening to the podcast and you're wondering what that is, it's a series where I have artists on the podcast that share their stories, give out advice, and you can find the past episodes of the Jets Talk With series if you go between episode 16 and episode 22. So thejetsspotlight.com/episode 16 and then episode 17 and so forth until episode 22 with Dave Holland. And, just to give you some names of the artists that have been guests on the podcast, there has been a great bassist, Dave Holland, fantastic singers like Jamie Cullum, Jose James, Zara McFarlane. There's been Pierre Chrétien of the Soul Jazz Orchestra. There's been pianist Mark Carey, guitarist Kevin Eubanks. So plenty of great guests. And as I said, you can find them from episode 16 to episode 22. I just want to remind you before you start listening that you can find the links to all the things you hear on this interview at thejetsspotlight.com/episode 25. Here is a Jets Talk with Dee Dee Bridgewater. Enjoy. Hey, what's up, everyone? Yanni Lunga here, and welcome to the Jets Spotlight podcast. Thank you for being with me today. And I don't know where to start because we have a great guest today. Really, it's so difficult to even introduce this guest. During her career, she has won 3 Grammy Awards, a Tony Award. She is the host of the NPR program Jet Set with, and I'm not going to tell you her name, but basically it's Jet Set with her name. And she's also the United Nations ambassador for the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. And most importantly, she's a great singer and a fantastic woman. It's with great pleasure that I welcome on the show Dee Dee Bridgewater. Hey, how are you today?
I'm fine, Yannick. How are you?
I'm fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for being with me today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Well, it's an honor for me to be on your show.
Oh, all right.
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds like we're going to have a lot of fun. We have so many things to talk about. But, the first question I often ask my guests, you have been having a fantastic career, and I have to ask you, how did you get started with music?
Oh, I grew up with music in my home. My father was a trumpet player, and my mother loved singers. So always in my home, there was music playing. And I just have been singing all my life since I was a little girl. And my mother used to ask me to come and sing for her bridge club when she would be playing the card game bridge. Mm-hmm. And I would do that. And by the age of 16, I started my first vocal trio. We called ourselves the Iridescents. And in high schools back then, we had talent contests. And so we would enter into talent contests and we would win. And it was like that. When I was 16, I won a talent contest, and my prize was to sing in a local club in Flint, Michigan, where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And my father had to be my chaperone because I was too young to be in the club, as they served alcohol. And he would escort me out, and they called me Little Dee Dee Garrett because Garrett was my maiden name. Then my father, when I was 18, took me to Michigan State University, where I was going, and introduced me to a dear friend of his from Memphis, Tennessee, a man by the name of Andy Goodrich, mm-hmm. who was an alto saxophonist. Andy was working on his doctorate degree, but he had a quintet. So he added me to his quintet, and it became the Andy Goodrich Quintet Plus One. Mm-hmm. I started going around to collegiate jazz festivals with that quintet and began to win the vocal categories, or I would get special mention if there was no vocal category. And that's how I met my first husband, Cecil Bridgewater. Mm-hmm. And with Cecil in Champaign, Illinois, where Cecil was living, where I met him at the University of Illinois, I ended up joining the University of Illinois Jazz Band and going on a tour to Russia. And then afterwards, Cecil proposed to me, and a few months later, we married and we moved to New York. And that was the beginning. 6 months after being in New York, I won the vocal chair with the famous Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra. So there you go. That was it in a nutshell.
That's incredible. I mean, you really try to make it, to give us, a short version, because obviously we cannot be here like too long, because I know that you're very busy. But already there, I was really listening with my mouth open, and I was just thinking, that's unbelievable. And, you have, as I said, you have been nominated to 7 Grammys, you have won 3, you have won a Tony Award for the musical The Wiz, you are the UN ambassador for the FAO, and you also been inducted in the Au Conseil de la Francophonie in France, and you have been performing all over the world. Pretty much all the biggest clubs and festivals has welcomed you. So I have to ask you, what do you consider to be the biggest achievement of your musical career?
Oh, I don't know that I've had a biggest achievement in my musical career. I've had so many wonderful things that have happened to me. Of course, winning each of the Grammys that I won, those were great achievements. We could talk about, wonderful people that I performed with. Mm-hmm. I'd say one of the biggest things would have to be working with Ray Charles and recording the duet that I did mm-hmm. with Ray Charles, which is called Precious Thing, and being able to work with him over a 2-year period. That was pretty amazing. Also singing for Pope John Paul mm-hmm. At the Vatican, and for the International World Youth Day in Paris, France, for more than 1 million people. That was pretty huge. Mm-hmm. Goodness, but I'd say also working with all of the jazz greats that I had the opportunity to perform with, such as Dizzy Gillespie and Sonny Rollins. Mm-hmm. I've been very, very fortunate. I'd say also working with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra. That was my music school. I did not have any formal music training, but Thad Jones, I'd say everything that I know about music, I have learned from Thad. And how I think about music, I learned from Thad. Also having the opportunity to tour with my first husband, Cecil Bridgewater, mm-hmm. When we first moved to New York City in 1970, he was hired for Silver's band, Horace, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago. So instead of going on a honeymoon, I went on tour with my first husband, and getting to listen, having the opportunity to listen to Horace and performing every night, getting that music in my blood, that was pretty amazing. So I've had so many opportunities So very many. So I would also say that living in France was a huge opportunity for me because living in that country allowed me to become the artist that I am today and the woman that I am today. I was given many, many opportunities just based on my talent. I never had to audition. I was always just asked to perform. You know, I had my own television shows, my own radio shows. I did television movies. I did a movie with the great Charles Aznavour. I just have had, living in France, just tremendous opportunities. I've been decorated with their highest honor, which is Commander in the Order of Arts and Letters, Commandeur dans l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. And that is a very distinguished award. The highest award you can get after that is Légion d'honneur and the Legion of Honor. So that's the only award that I haven't received in France, you know, for cultural awards. So I feel very, very blessed because of all those wonderful years that I spent in that country. It also gave me the opportunity to learn a second language. It also gave my daughters, who were 8 and 14 at the time that we first moved there, the opportunity to learn a second language. They are now trilingual. I guess my greatest feat that I achieved in France was the birth of my son. His name is Gabriel Durand, and with my third husband, and he's now 22. So I always wanted a boy, and my third husband, Jean-Marie Durand, gave me a son. That's my greatest achievement in France. And I have to say probably my greatest achievements are my children.
That sounds like a very proud mom, and I'm very happy for you and and your family, and also for all the great achievements and recognitions you talked about. They're very, very well deserved. But I have to ask you this because I actually got the pleasure to get to know your daughter China Moses a couple of years ago. I was working at the Jazz Ascona Festival in Switzerland, and she was performing there.
Yes.
So I had the chance to meet her also through interviews, and I was making some translations as well. And you have been also, or she has also been performing with you. And I have to ask you, how does it feel, for a mom to perform with the daughter, on a big stage?
Oh my goodness, it's the most rewarding. I can't even describe it. It's so rewarding. It's so gratifying to stand on a stage with my daughter, to look over to my right or my left, whichever side she's on, and watch this wonderful young woman perform that I birthed. I always have to kind of stand back and go, did I create this baby? Did I make this? She's a fantastic performer. She's a great singer. I'm so proud of China. She's a wonderful TV personality, and she's now starring in a new version of Cabaret in France. And I'm going to go and see her perform because her production is the original production of Cabaret, not the Bob Fosse adaptation, so which I did. So she is only the second African-American actress to portray Sally Bowles, and her mother was the first. So it's she's also talented as a songwriter. She's just a dynamo. China is absolutely a dynamo. And sharing the stage with her it gives me chills, and it's tremendous.
That's so cool to hear. And you know what? She's also a very super cool person. I mean, I remember she was really, really nice and really laid back. And, it was nice also to work with artists who are like her. Yes. Now, I have to ask you a little bit to share some tips with us, because the topic of this episode is, how to be creative and how to get inspired, how to find inspiration. And I'm sure that many of the listeners are wondering, how do you find inspiration?
I find my inspiration just in life, through living. I am a very grateful person. When I wake up every day, I'm very grateful to get up. I am also very grateful for all of the things in my life. I'm even grateful when I have obstacles in my life because I learn from those obstacles. I don't feel that there's any bad experience. I feel all experiences are learning experiences. So my inspiration comes from, it can be someone that I meet. It can be a place that I go, because I just try to keep my eyes open and my ears tuned and my heart open. You know, it can be driving down a road and for example, I have just had to move to Los Angeles because my mother has dementia, and I had to put her into a 24-hour assisted care facility here. So I had to move here, so I had to sell my home, a home that I thought I was going to be in for the rest of my life. I think driving down the street here, I'm just taken aback by all of the homelessness that I see in Los Angeles. And maybe it's because the climate is warm that, you know, people are out and you know, I go out of my apartment building and every night there are homeless people sleeping on the steps of the church across the street. And which has gotten me thinking, what can I do to help those people? Those things, they inspire me. You know, they can be the inspiration for writing a lyric, or for giving me the energy to do an even better show when I'm performing. You know, so I just try to take my inspiration from everything, anything and everything.
Yeah.
There are times, though, I would like to say, there are times when I don't feel inspired, when I can be so overwhelmed by my own personal life that, you know, I don't have the inspiration. But I can say this: as soon as I get on the stage and I start singing, I am healed. Music is a very powerful healing tool.
Amen. It's true. I totally agree. And it's also true that, you know, everyone has his own or her own way to get inspired and find inspiration. But I had to ask you, because some of the listeners are artists themselves, or are, you know, would like to be artists, are studying music. So if you were to give an advice to the listeners, what would you tell them, you know, to find inspiration?
You know, I think, like you said, you know, every individual is different. So every individual has to kind of find their own way. I can give an example for learning the opera Carmen by Georges Bizet. I had to go on a retreat. And I had to be silent and just, you know, do nothing but listen to that music. And I did that for 4 days so that I could begin to get into the voice and to get into the opera. And Maria Callas was my inspiration for doing that opera. I think, you know, every individual has to try and listen to their own inner voice. I believe that we all have an inner voice that speaks to us. It is a connection to the higher power within ourselves. And I think that we all know when something feels good, when it doesn't, when something is right or wrong. And it's when we listen to that voice instead of ignoring it and trying to use rationalizations to do something we think we should do, that's where we go wrong. So I try very, very hard today to just listen to that inner voice, to not be afraid to be the only person doing what you're doing, to not be afraid to dress the way you feel you want to dress. Something that I've done that has been extremely liberating for me, but women come up to me all the time and say, "You're so bold to have done it," is I shaved my head. You know, I shaved my hair. I decided, now this is, it'll soon be going into my 8th year. But I decided in 2007, it was in September of 2007, I had a very traumatic year. I was losing my hair. It was very thin. And I was disgusted with hair. And I thought, you know, women are judged. We are judged by our hair.
Mm-hmm.
Our hair is called our crowning glory. And I wanted to get beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get to my higher spiritual self. So I shaved my hair. I shaved it all off. And now I'm shaved.
Mm-hmm.
And it has freed me in so many ways, because people have to look at me. They have to look at me in my face, in my eyes, instead of a hairdo that I have. And it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing. So that's a way that I found. But that was me listening to my inner voice. So my suggestion to the listeners is to listen to your inner voice and not be afraid to express yourself. Who knows? They could start a trend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to cut my hair in very strange designs, and I started a trend with some of my haircuts because I was like the first one that people saw. So I've never been afraid to be myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be fearless.
To be fearless, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
To be absolutely fearless. We have to learn how to be fearless. It doesn't mean that you won't have fear
No, well,
from time to time.
Yeah.
You know, but you must try to be as fearless as possible, I think, as an artist.
Yeah, and actually, not only as an artist, but in life in general. I mean, now we're talking about music, so definitely applies to music.
Yes.
And, you know, if you have been like on fire, you have been a great performer for, you know, being all over the world. And is there something you would like to tell to all of those who are perhaps starting to become a singer? Is there something you would like to tell them that perhaps, you know, people usually don't know about?
I like to say to singers, in particular, if they want to be jazz singers, to not listen to other singers, to try to listen to instrumentalists who perform songs that they want to sing, so that they can get the sense of improvisation. I say to singers to always learn the melody,
Mm-hmm.
to learn it inside out. I say that to musicians as well, to learn not the melody so much, but the lyric,
Mm-hmm.
to learn the lyric to a song, because for a musician, it helps them to understand what the song is about and what that composer and songwriter had in mind when they were doing that song. But to learn a melody inside out for all singers will enable them to gain the kind of confidence and freedom that they need to begin to improvise. I always say to sing your melody first,
Mm-hmm.
and then go into your improvisation, because the audience that's listening to you needs to know the melody, and then they can understand your abilities as an improvisationalist. I say to singers to try to take acting classes so they learn how to perform and to be in a space.
Mm-hmm.
I found all of my acting experiences have been invaluable for me as a performer. I think of myself, to coin a phrase of Tony Bennett, as a jazz entertainer,
Mm-hmm.
because I try to entertain my audience. I try to give them the best show that I can. I get arrangements. I have those arrangements tailored to me, to my voice and what I'm hearing in a song. I'm never afraid to say to an arranger, I don't like that part. It does not work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please change it? I say to singers to respect the musicians. We are only as good as the musicians we work with, and musicians are your friends. So be inclusive. I see so many singers who stand in front of a band and do not include the band.
Mm-hmm.
They do not acknowledge the band.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that is extremely important. And then, you know, to breathe correctly, to breathe from your diaphragm. If you don't breathe from your diaphragm, you risk, and you're singing in your chest, you risk developing nodules on your vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
And refrain from smoking if you can, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because that can harm your voice as well, you know. So all of those things I have found to be extremely helpful. And getting sleep. the proper amount of sleep. If you don't get the proper amount of rest, your voice will not be at its optimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. And as I said from in the beginning, great singer, a great woman, and it's really nice to hear to these kind of words from someone like you, even when you talk about the importance of including the musicians and also to include the audience. So to be not just a singer or a musician, but an entertainer, a performer. I really like that.
Let me say something else, Yannick.
Yeah, sure.
One other thing that I find a lot of, and this goes across the board, anyone who's in the entertainment industry who is a performer of any kind, so often they do not consider all of the work that goes into putting a show on, whether it's in a club or it's on a concert stage of any size. The promoter, the person who has hired you, the technicians, the sound engineers, the lighting people, all of the people if you're in a club, the waiters, the waitresses, all of these people are important. And you need to acknowledge all of these people. We cannot do a show without those people getting behind us to organize these events. And so I try to be grateful to them and say thank you to them. If I have an exceptional experience, I will write a note. Now I send an email because no one wants a letter. But occasionally I will send a thank you note because that's become something almost obsolete. And people love that you take the time to write and say thank you so much. So you have to acknowledge the people that help you along the way in your career. Because I have had such good relationships with people, it has opened the door for my daughter. It has opened the door for other singers that I may recommend, and even singers that I don't recommend. So you have to remember, everyone has to remember they are a kind of ambassador for their trade, whatever their trade may be.
Yeah, no, it's really, again, it's really nice to hear these things from you. And, thank you for being who you are, because it's really nice, even for me, when I asked you about this podcast, you were really up for it. And, I wish that there were more people in your position that had the same mindset you have. And I have a last question for you. I'm looking at your website, I'm looking at your tour dates, and I see that you're going to be at Newport Jazz Festival, and then you're going to be around quite a lot. I see Italy, I see France. You're going to perform in the beautiful Mont Saint-Michel.
Oh, yes. I'm so excited about Mont Saint-Michel. Oh, yes.
And then I see the Blue Note, and then I see Switzerland, my home country, and United Kingdom. So you're gonna be around. What are the plans for the future? Is there something that you can share with us?
Well, I am working on a couple of music projects. I did the recording with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, which is we call NOJO, N-O-J-O, the initials, and their musical director, who is a young trumpeter by the name of Irvin Mayfield.
Who I also got to know in Ascona, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So Irvin, I have been working with Irvin and NOJO for the last 3 years off and on. I'm the honorary chairwoman of the board of directors for NOJO, and they are building a smaller version of Jazz at Lincoln Center in New Orleans. They're going to call it the Jazz Market, and they are opening a theater in the Jazz Market that they are going to name the Dee Dee Bridgewater Theater.
Wow.
So to commemorate that and to commemorate this new love affair that, well, I've always loved New Orleans, but because of Irvin Mayfield, I'm going down there so often now. He says his goal is to have me move there part time, so that may well happen. But we did a recording with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra of all New Orleans songs that were arranged by different members in the big band, and so we are working on getting that released. It looks like Universal Music Group, who distributes my label, DDB Records, is interested in having me put it out on my label through their distribution. And so that is going to happen hopefully in the spring of next year to coincide with the opening of the jazz market in New Orleans. It's everything is being done in New Orleans. The photo shoot, everyone involved in the recording is from New Orleans, and that's something I'm very proud about. And then I'm beginning work on my next big project, which is going to be a blues project, and kind of continuing the research into my genealogy, where I did my Red Earth project, and I went to Mali where I found my African ancestry. I am now coming to America, and I'll be going to Mississippi because that is where both my families. That's as far back as we could trace on both sides of my family. Both my parents' families came out of Mississippi, and then I'm going to go up to Memphis, where I was born. So that's going to be my next big project, and I'm going to be doing that a little differently. Instead of going into a studio, I'm going to record track by track, depending on the artists who are available for that project. So that's a very big project. I have new artists that I've just released on my label on DDB Records named Theo Croker, a trumpet player, and his album is getting rave reviews, and it is called Afrophysicist. And to help expose Theo, I am touring the rest of this year with his working band, which he calls Dark Funk. So he's a very innovative, very talented trumpeter. He's 28 years old, and his grandfather was the famous jazz trumpeter Doc Cheatham, who's also from New Orleans. So it seems to be I'm in a trumpet playing season. I love trumpet players. My dad was a trumpet player. My first husband was a trumpet player. I had trumpet player boyfriends, and most of the musicians that I collaborate with have been trumpet players. Thad Jones, Dizzy Gillespie, Clark Terry. Before Miles Davis died, he wanted us to do an album together, and we talked about it. But he got very sick and died 6 months after. So, but I've always had a very strong attraction to the trumpet, and I think of my voice as the trumpet when I'm in a band without instruments. So I'm very excited about Theo. That's the first artist that I produced on my label. I'm also looking at other artists to produce. There's a young singer I'd like to produce, but I can't seem to corner her, so I might have to let her go. Yes.
But hey, sounds very excited. NOLA fans, Dee Dee Bridgewater fans, blues fans, make sure to keep your ears open, because soon there's going to be many great stuff coming up. And I will also make sure to put the links to all the things we have talked about, also the artists you've talked about, in the show notes, so that people can always find there the information. Dee Dee, thank you so much for being on the podcast. May I ask you to sing us a short goodbye for all of those who are listening?
Goodbye, no use leading without chance. This is where our story ends. Never lovers, ever friends. Goodbye, let our hearts call it a day. But before you walk away, I sincerely want to say, I wish you bluebirds in the spring to give your heart a song to sing, and then a kiss, but more than this, I wish you love.
Thank you very much. This was Dee Dee Bridgewater, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome, Yannick. I enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. All right, we are back. First thing, like always, I want to thank my guest, Dee Dee Bridgewater. A big thank you goes to you. Thank you for being on the podcast, for taking time for being with us. And I have to share this with you because she actually told me that this was one of the first podcasts she had been invited to. So, I feel really honored to have had her on the podcast. I want to remind you that you can find all the past episodes of the Jet Spotlight podcast at thejetspotlight.com/podcast. You find all the 25 episodes of the podcast there, and you will always find the new episodes up there. And also remember that every help you can give to the podcast and the Jet Spotlight is appreciated. So if you have enjoyed these episodes, or someone that you think will benefit from these episodes, for example, today, if you know someone that would like to be a singer and you think you and could definitely use the advice Dee Dee Bridgewater shared on the podcast with us, make sure to share it with them and tag the Jet Spotlight on Twitter or Facebook so that I can personally thank you for helping out with the promotion. What can I tell you? I can give you a preview about next week. Next week, another great guest, obviously on the podcast for you, and we're gonna go behind the scene of a very popular Jets website, and we're also gonna learn more about other things of the music industry and about a record label. Sounds very cool, doesn't it? If you want to learn more about it, you have to tune back next week at thejetspotlight.com/podcast or straight to the new episode, which will be thejetspotlight.com/episode 26. I'm Yanni Lunga, and this was the Jet Spotlight podcast. Thank you for being with me. Have a great day.